Hello, Neil.
Hello, Ben.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
That's all right. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Because as we were saying off camera, it's going to be really interesting to get your different perspectives of a lot of the stuff that you've done in the past and how that kind of, I don't know, how that impacts on children, young people and community and improving things for people.
Yeah. It's going to be weird as well for me to remember that I'm being interviewed.
Well, that's
so
all
I
right.
might every now and again go, so Ben, what do you think about that? And it's just like, yeah, shit, sorry, yeah.
You can ask me questions if you want, mate, it's fine. Just a chat.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this coming in. Can you remember when we first met? I can remember. It might not be so memorable for you.
That's a good question. I think I do. Was it me coming into the Park Centre, into the office at Youth Moves to interview people for newspaper?
It was way before.
Was
that.
it really?
It was,
do you know what?
it literally was. Hello, mate. I mean, do you want me to...
jog my memory, because like, when you say it, I probably will know.
So before I was working at Youth Moves, I worked at loads of different places.
Yeah.
I started up a voluntary-led youth club at Redcatch Park. You were doing some sports-based stuff. And basically, this voluntary-led youth club had shed loads of numbers. We set it up in a football changing rooms. Had local people that were supporting it. You were getting 40, 50 kids a night that were outdoors. And I think you come and borrowed the numbers. I mean, I can't remember.
Street games, that would have been. Street games. Like, we probably chucked a coach from street games to you and then just nobbled all the monetary valuation from it, as you did back in the day. And I'm sure people still do. No, I do.
Not me, mate,
I do. No, I do. Yeah.
But that was a long time ago. And I think probably at different times we bumped into each other.
How long ago would that have been? 20 years ago, I reckon. It would have been 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, yeah.
Bloody hell, mate. Yeah. This is the years, isn't it?
How old are you now?
45.
Oh, yeah.
How old are you? I'm a spring chicken.
Mid to late 30s. I was actually 50 this year, believe it or not. But
mate,
I kept, thank you. But you say congratulations, but I kind of kept it very quiet, to be honest. Yeah.
Why? You just celebrate it.
I don't know. It just kind of, I did a big 40th birthday, right, where I invited some people I hadn't seen for God knows how long, and they all came along, and it was like, oh, great to see you again, let's keep in touch, let's catch up. I haven't seen any of them in 10 years, so it felt a bit weird doing a 50th, inviting the same people that I'd not seen, so I'm going to wait till my 60th.
Do you know what? That's interesting you say that, because I've done that as well, and I actually already hearing you saying it think, I haven't seen a lot of them since my 40th, but it would be a bit weird.
It is a weird feeling though, like it feels like sort of, I don't know, you know when people, I saw t-shirts saying it's weird being the same age as old people, so when someone goes like, oh, he's 41, and I'll go, God bloody hell, is he that old? And my missus will go, you're like literally 50, what are you talking about? I just forget. In my head, I feel like I'm in my mid-20s still. Do you know what I mean?
That's the way to be though, isn't it? Surely.
I guess.
I mean, it's a lot better than feeling like you're 90 and you're
I mean, 50. I probably don't even, do I feel like a grown-up?
You don't talk like one.
Exactly, only just about, but anyway.
I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, talking about growing up, this is my slick segue.
Very good. Smooth.
I want to know about what it was like for you growing
Me?
up. Where did you grow up, and what was the positives? What were the challenges?
So I grew up in sort of Eastfield, that kind of side of town. Always, even to this day, I think everywhere I've lived in Bristol, and I have moved away and come back, I can always see from either my bedroom window or from the house or the back garden the telecom tower at the top of Lockleys. So I've always been like East Bristol. As was my dad, as was my sort of great grand, going back and back. So there is a photo of a cobbler's shop called Mags's Cobbler Shop on Stapleton Road. I've got from like the 1850s.
Wow.
With different generations, and then another one from the 1920s. So it's like kind of So we were there from back in the day. So for me, so I've grown up. I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because you sort of look back on it and you think, you didn't have loads, but then you don't really think about it. And I sort of feel probably quite a good upbringing. Spent most of my time outdoors, playing Eastfield Park, playing football, playing with my mates, stuff like that. And then I think you get to that teenage sort of age a little bit, and I think that was a bit awkward for me, I think, around that sort of 13, 14, 15. I think what it was, right, and this is going to sound sort of slightly conceited, and I don't mean it like this. Suddenly, I started getting loads of interest from girls, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Yeah, genuinely. Now.
Can people please comment on this?
Yeah, genuinely. I didn't have a beard then, but and it was like, because I was like you may or may not know, but I was quite a talented footballer, and I was at Southampton.
Billy Big Spencer, someone's good at football at that
and
age.
that comes with all that sort of stuff a little bit, and suddenly it was like, it was all about football for me, or just sport in general. And then it became like, suddenly girls start showing that sort of interest. I didn't quite know what to do with it, and would be a bit like, ooh, about it all. And I remember feeling quite awkward for a time. And when I went on to work in youth work, I kind of connected sometimes with those kids that were a bit like that. So I kind of went from being the sort of, I don't know, what's the word? Quite overnight, really, like confident and sort of, out there, sportsman, to then being quite uncomfortable in that. I remember that period of being quite unhappy from sort of 13 to 15, 16, and then sort of grew into myself as I was a bit older. But what I did do, which is interesting, I would say I was quite a late developer in terms of some of the sort of social stuff kids do. So my missus was doing whatever she was doing in parks at the age of 12 and stuff like that, whereas I was kind of committed to football. I remember quite distinctly, and this was in an era when football wasn't trendy or fashionable. Like sort of.
I'm holding back.
Well, it's like today's rock stars, aren't they? Really, do you know what I mean? Was I remember running past the park where people are like drinking and smoking,
they were still
and they're
rock
like,
stars in your time.
No, they were shouting at me, sort of like, "Look at you bloody boring square!" Like, because I'd be out running every night. See, so I kind of avoided all of that. And without going too much into it, I didn't quite make it in football. I came quite close. I came close. I was at Southampton, so I spent a lot of time sort of sacrificing things that other kids would do.
And the family that sacrifices a bloody.
And the family, of course, we used to. I was quite lucky in that regard. My dad was very committed to my football. Arguably, maybe a little bit too much, you could say.
Right, was it a part of him?
A little bit pushy. Yeah.
You see it a lot.
A bit of that. So. But in that regard, that was beneficial, because I think it can affect young people when they don't have that sort of support structure. And then I didn't make it. I did all like England schoolboys. I was kind of had other clubs around me, and sort of when I come to about 17, and in my head I'd had 2 or 3 rejections around football, then the rave scene kicked in. And that was like the Pandora's box opened, and all the stuff I wasn't doing when I was 13, 14, 15, 16 was just like,
Come on, tell me more. I love this.
Well, I just kind of... So I've got a lot of friends in football. So I'm not knocking people that play football, but there can be sometimes a certain, and there certainly was back then, mentality. Anyone who was a little bit different was sort of ostracised a bit. And I was always somebody that had friends outside of football that were maybe... that I sort of people who are into sort of skateboarding, or kind of people that were a little bit more alternative and a bit more kind of, and I always found that I felt a bit different, I think, in the football changing room, and felt that, and didn't feel like it was fully my thing. And then suddenly I went to the rave where people didn't judge you. It could be anything and anybody, and it was like I kind of like found my I don't know what the word I'm looking for.
You're calling, or maybe just it's somewhere that you could be yourself.
I could be myself.
Feel free. I mean, I could go on about it because
exactly. You were the same. You were involved in it,
absolutely loved it.
I felt like I've kind of found myself on the dance floor, really.
I know this sounds really cheesy, and I do sessions on it with young people and all the rest of it. But absolutely, it just changed a lot of people's lives.
As did my brother was the same. As did some of our friends. It just became like a thing. I mean, I continued to play football to a relatively decent level, but I then suddenly, the kind of comments or the feelings of feeling a bit awkward or uncomfortable around a certain type of mentality. There was a lot of misogyny, there was a lot of homophobia, there was a lot of macho sort of nonsense in football then. It didn't bother me then. It was kind of like I was sort of cocooned.
Well, that's normal, because you don't know anything else. And at that point, it's only when you step out of that and you think, hang on a minute, what are they on about?
Yeah. So I would be, sort of within the football change room, I would then be, like sort of, raving weirdo, and all that would be my kind of sort of thing. But it was like it just fell off me. So I think a lot of people maybe felt like that at the time. It felt like like a calling, like you said, really.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's 2 different stories to that. I guess probably not that it's about me anyway today, but like my story is more doing too much of the raving and the football stopped. Do you know what I mean? Like there's different. Do you know what I mean? So it's great that you continued in some way.
I did, but I never really played at the standard I should have done. But because it became less important.
Right.
I mean, I got a great story. I don't know how candid we can be on this, but when I then...
I say go for it. But then I normally say the wrong thing.
So I started to, having been really, really committed, like I said, I then started to be less so, but I still had natural ability. But it was almost like, I remember... So I had a chance to go to American college, 2 colleges in America, one in New York and one in West Virginia, to study and to play football, which came around all the England schoolboys stuff. And then I didn't, and then
What position were you? I bet you were a centre back or
centre
something.
back. Yeah,
I could tell. I could tell.
Well, I was a kind of ball. I was a ball playing centre half then, believe it or not.
Right.
So yeah, and then I played in holding midfield. I became more physical with age. I was probably a bit too soft then.
Okay.
Yeah, became a little bit more hard-nosed as I went on. But I remember, so I eventually took a year out, and I'm skipping on a bit now, but when I did go to university, which was the first person ever from any of my family to go.
Yeah.
And I was put into the British Universities trial for the universities team in Sheffield.
Okay.
So we went to Sheffield, 2 of us from Huddersfield Uni, yeah.
What were you studying?
English and media, and media. I'll get onto that.
Wow.
So, yeah, full circle. See?
So it wasn't just a massive skip
well,
to
I did.
journalism.
I wanted to be a journalist when I was younger, and I didn't manage to do it. So it was a bit of a thing that came later. Okay. And anyway, we went out in Sheffield, didn't get into about 7 in the morning. I didn't turn up for the trial, and didn't give a shit. That was where my head. That was where my head. That was where my head was at, because also, I'd had a series of 3 real strong kickbacks. I remember Southampton, like this, 1-on-1, called into a room, told you ain't going to make it, you ain't good enough. And I can remember the blood just rushing from my face.
What's the impact of that? Because I've got mates that have been in similar situations.
Do you know what?
I've only ever dreamt of football, and then suddenly it goes, and it's like, what else is there?
I don't really think at the time, I remember the specific moment, I can see it in my mind's eye now, being told, and just freezing, leaving the room, walking past, because it's one of those things where, about 10 people were being told what was going on. And ironically, I played really well. We were away in the Tidworth Army camp, used to go and do training camps, which is in Wiltshire, and walking past some of the lads, and they were like, well, and I just couldn't look at them, and just locked the toilet door and just cried for about 45 minutes.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. It's a dream, isn't it?
Yeah, and then remember speaking to my dad, and he was actually quite supportive. I was worried what he was going to say. So that happened. Then I was playing England schoolboys, and I picked up a knee injury. This is England under 18s, this is now. And I had clubs sniffing around me. And they were reducing the squad from 20 to 18 to away games. We were going to Holland, Belgium, France, Germany, and all this. And I was one of the 2 that they got rid of. But one of the players they brought in wasn't even in the 20. Big guy, what was his name? Jason, something or other. Huge, 6'5", massive centre half, different centre half than me. Okay. And I was like, he can't even play. Look at him, this, that, and the other. Anyway, he went on to play about 500 games for Swansea City.
Well, that's about right.
But so that was the second thing, and then the third thing I think was, if I remember rightly, was I then had a couple of clubs coming in for me at when I was playing non-league, and it looked like I was going to be offered a pro contract, and then the guy that wanted me then left the club. So it was like Ipswich, Rovers, and
I was going to say, surely, no.
After that third time, I was just like, do you know what? I didn't care anymore, and I just fully embraced myself into the rave scene, and then got burnt in the end.
When you say burnt, what do you mean? As in done too much?
Done too much, yeah.
As in mentally burnt?
Mentally burnt.
Yeah.
Completely.
Well, there's a lot of people. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
It took me several years to get my shit back together.
I always... I mean, my missus was, into the same kind of scene as well, and all my mates growing up. So it's like, there's obviously people that have been. To be honest with you, there's people that have passed away. There's people that have, that have had major episodes, and there's and everything in between. And there's people that have had nothing. I wonder how. I'm going off on one, but I wonder how. Whether that impacts on people of our kind of age range and a bit older, as they get older, how that might impact on them. Yeah. Later on in life. I don't know. Obviously, there's no research on it because it's happening. I don't know if it would.
Guinea pig generation, isn't it? Really, in some regards. I mean, like you. I mean, we've lost 2 people that kind of went fully schizophrenic, Baragurney, what was then the mental hospital, that never really came back. Yeah. 2 people that ended up pretty much drinking themselves to death. A third person became a heroin addict and is now still homeless.
The thing that kind of somehow crept in, and then I mean, it's within my family, let alone other places. But it's just like, it's brutal, isn't it?
Yeah. And this, but I think that, and this was all, I guess, I would say people sort of self-medicating actually after probably doing too much.
Well, there was no understanding of what a mental health thing. What was mental health? It wasn't even a bloody word, was it? Everyone's one love and giving it flipping massive, living the dream, and the next thing you know, it's like the downs stay down, and what do you do?
There was a flip side to it, and it's quite similar to if I talk to sort of older hippies in like my missus's family, her dad and that are a bit sort of hippies and stuff. This sort of thing happened in the late 60s. It was all like free love, and then it all took a turn. And I think that what was about people getting high, and I don't necessarily in a drug related sense, just people getting high on the music,
coming together,
the atmosphere,
being with people,
the
in
unity thing.
Yeah.
I don't think people ever really realise, maybe the younger generation I talk to now, I'm sort of conscious of feeling like
no idea.
Uncle Albert from Only Fools and Horses back in my day. But this was a period where you had gothics, true romantic punks, football hooligans, all coming together, and no one cared who and what you were. And that was pretty revolutionary at that time. Yeah. Didn't happen. And I think the flip side to that just became, how can I say it? I think if you can, at the age of 20, right, take a little tablet and it just makes everything amazing, right? Then I think on some level it just becomes, you then keep chasing that. And everything else is like, well, why should I do that? Why should I do this? Because that takes me to a euphoric state that nothing else can. As great as that may have been for our generation, it sort of sends a slightly destructive message, I think. You chase a rainbow a little bit that then could never be fulfilled. And I think that's what happened to a lot of people.
I mean, maybe the reality is it can do, can it? And with some it would, some it wouldn't. But I mean, it's interesting now. You look at all the research that people are trying to do in medicating with trauma and various things. But the big thing with that is
control conditions.
Exactly. It's that supportive guidance, supporting people to whatever the root causes of their challenges, traumas are, and then supporting them through a journey to then, come to peace with it. The difference is like going down the flipping, I don't know,
they're not taking
exposure or whatever.
Exactly. They're not taking 7, are they, and staying up for 3 days. It's like you said, as a psychotherapist. Yeah, because there's a lot of this MDMA therapy, trauma-assisted therapy, all of that.
Psilocybin.
And I can see that side of it. Having experienced that most definitely 100% can heal people and make them whole. But I think you've got to know when to pull back.
And you need to have the support alongside it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think probably that a lot of people that have got burned, maybe the support, well, not maybe, the support won't help.
Yeah, for sure.
That's we're
I've been incredibly open and honest, but it is what it is. Like that is a lot of people don't talk about this stuff, but I know it infected an awful lot of our generation.
It needs to be spoken about. I think and it's good that you are honest. That's only a positive thing. Yeah. I mean, I wonder as well then. So when you were growing up, and we'll come back to the uni and the journalism bit because that's going to fit in with stuff we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
I wonder when you were growing up, did you feel like you had your voice heard? As a young person, as a young adult, in your teens?
Depends where, really.
In whatever context.
In what context?
In the context, did you feel like
you
were listened to?
I'm the youngest of 4, yeah?
Okay.
So I kind of made myself be heard. I was quite mouthy. Right. I wasn't really shy of giving my opinion and probably pushed and forced my way in to get heard. Whether young people as a general thing were listened to and heard, probably not. I mean, I got distinct memories, and it's quite interesting seeing it in my family unfold now, where our kind of nephews and nieces, or my brother-in-laws and stuff, and how they are with their children, where they will stop in a conversation like me and you are having now and go, sorry, what we, And the older generation, i.e. my mum, my father-in-law, stuff like that, they're like, we're talking. Yeah, it's and I just distinctly remember not being allowed to talk when adults were talking, let alone talk over them, and how that's shifted and changed now, almost to the point that it's like, no, I need to hear what the young person's saying, which is great, but it also annoys me a little bit as well. Yeah, so I think in the family structure, definitely young people weren't listened to and heard. I think in the context of kind of, in
the community, in society, in school, do you feel like your voice was valued? Was it heard? Did you ever even have that thought? I mean, why would you back then? But looking on it now, reflecting.
No, probably a lot less so than it is now. I think there were certain sort of non-negotiables. We think and feel this, and it would be like, so what? That isn't going to change anything, yeah? Yeah, exactly. But I was playing a lot of sport, so I think probably in that context, found my voice in that. I played, as you say, centre half in a position where you have to talk and organise and be. And I had that. I would get noticed in games that other people wouldn't because I'd be mouthy. This is completely opposite to my brother, though. So my brother was the person that was quiet, didn't say much. Was on the outside.
Obviously, he's older. You just said.
I mean, he's older. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. When he's in a safe environment and he's listened to, you can't shut up. Yeah, to the point you wish he would. But he was one of those that would have been on the kind of peripheral edges. So what was interesting for me is whilst I was popular because I was the best at football in the schools I went to or in the area in which I grew up, I'm always acutely aware my brother was the last person to get picked.
And differences.
I know so even to this day when I work with kids and stuff now and I see them line them up and pick two captains and I'm like, no, don't do that. I'm kind of I've always been mindful of the outsider or the underdog and felt that presence a little bit, maybe because of that. That makes sense?
Yeah, and I suspect probably maybe because of your lived experience of what you've experienced so far, of, working towards something, football, and it not happening, and understanding that not everyone gets the glitter ball at the end of the freaking dance. Do you know what I mean? Like, and there's
the amount of parents that
and
think
you were
and
even
feel
on the
that.
journey. There's many people that weren't on that journey. And there's so much in between that.
Yeah.
I wonder whether we go straight into then, because I know you spoke about going to uni. Mm-hmm. And it was journalism by the sounds of it, and English that you were studying. Yeah. How then did that feed into employment? And maybe talk about a little bit about your kind of your career so far, but like touching on the themes of roughly what the jobs were. So I'm sure.
What did I do?
What did you do?
I mean, because of the stuff we spoke about. I mean, I went to uni and just about scraped through getting a degree whilst getting off my face quite a lot. Yeah. And then.
How old were you when you went to uni?
I took a year out between, so I would have been, 18? Yeah, no, 19.
19, wow, okay. Yeah. Didn't even consider it as an option.
Yeah. See, I was always quite academic, again, different from my brother. I was always naturally, I don't know why, not crap at maths and stuff, but I've always had a flair for writing, for communicating, for talking and stuff like that.
I love talking.
You love talking, yeah. Yeah, and I suppose what came with that is probably, it just sounds, lots of things were quite easy for me, too easy. So and that became part of that self-destruct thing. I get bored really quickly. I kind of, as I said, I dived 2 foot into this scene that then really, after I came out of uni, I mean, I was drifting for a long time. Different jobs, bit of travelling, on the dole. I didn't really find what I wanted or needed to do for quite some time, really. But I also had quite severe mental health issues at this point.
And that coincided with that.
So I was kind of like moved back at my mum's in the box room, didn't want to face the world, all of that. And that was quite a struggle. But yeah.
I don't want to delve into stuff that you don't want to talk about, so I really don't want to kind of do that. But I just wonder, just very kind of briefly, if anyone that was listening to this is finding themselves in a situation where they're struggling with life in whatever way, what helped you move on and get into a better place? If that is something you can say succinctly, if not, then...
I think eventually wading through, finding the right stuff that helped for me, which may be different for different people. And that took some time, I think.
What kind of things was that, just to kind of...
Well, I suppose so I was sectioned.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was in the psychiatric unit when I was 21. Right. And it was almost like I was regressed to being like a 10-year-old again. I just kind of, my mind just went pop. Mm-hmm. So I had to sort of build my mind and self back from kind of sort of scratch, and things like, and this sounds quite morbid, but it's true. So for me, something like, it'll be all right. If things get really bad, it's all right. I can kill myself. That would be like a positive that I'd have in my head, in my experience. To get a jail card, exactly. So that was where I was at for a bit, and I think it's not a straight road. There's lots of different kind of things, and I think I kind of was misdiagnosed an awful lot. There's a lot of misunderstanding in mental health circles. I don't think particularly in light of the guinea pig generation stuff. I don't think a lot of people within mental health, traditional NHS services, in my experience, were that great then at dealing with trauma. I think they're okay at things around depression or some degree of anxiety, but things that are a little bit more way out there, I think they sort of, I don't think they had perhaps the understanding. So I found more solace in spiritual practices.
Yeah.
So I started to do yoga, lot before, many people were
before
doing
the curve.
Before the curve, yeah. Meditation. It kind of took me a while to realise that I kind of got a diagnosis of PTSD about 10 years after.
Sounds like there must have been some kind of traumatic things that happened before.
There was, and I think you start to piece that together a bit, and it sort of starts to make sense when you're on that kind of journey. That may have been to this, and kind of, and there was a couple of incidents that sort of flipped me over the edge a little bit, alongside doing too much stuff. And I think part of that was also, I didn't really realise at the time how much it affected me not making it in football.
Yeah. So
every day it would be like, I want to be a footballer. I want to be a footballer. Yeah. It was just like a one. So I don't think I really took on that, and that impacted me more than I thought. To lead me into the behaviour.
It's your identity, isn't it? Like this is the thing. It could have been something else. But when if that is you, and then suddenly you are lost.
Yeah.
Well, then how do you deal with that? And if you haven't got the tools to deal with it,
for sure.
Who has?
Yeah. And then it becomes, this is Neil. He was going to be a pro footballer, he's this, he's that, and like all my mates are off sort of travelling to India or I don't know, working in jobs, and I'm like in my box room in my mum's house. Like what's happened to him is like a fall from grace. So aside from the mental turmoil, there was this sense of shame, sense of kind of
I hate to say
I failed.
I don't mean it like this, but it's probably like it's a massive dent to the ego as well.
100%.
And we're all
100%. Yeah, but all of that. So it took me a long sort of time. I think once I worked out some stuff that helped me, and also a little bit of therapy with the right people. It took me a while to get you got to kiss a frog to find a princess sort of thing, and all of that. Yeah, and I eventually found the right stuff that worked for me. Things around somatic experiencing, which is about breathing and feeling your trauma. EMDR. And
what's EMDR?
EMDR, is it EDM or EMDR?
Oh, movement.
Eye movement, yeah. And it was, kind of, which is, without getting too deep on it, it's sort of exposure therapy where you go back and feel certain things that happen, but you dip your toe in and you just process. I guess was on quite a mental health journey, but whilst I was doing this, I started to do youth work, and actually...
Was it youth work as first, was it? I thought it was sports development.
No, it was youth work first. Okay. Yeah, before any of that. It was early years, and then it was youth work. So I started working, whilst still being not quite sorted, like a lot of people, I think maybe go into, to a certain degree, into some therapeutic field or supporting people because
it gives you a high
so that
to support others.
So I would say, ironically, I know we're on a sort of youth podcast, doing youth work was also part of my healing journey as well.
Yeah.
And I found being able to make a difference to young people who had, different challenges than me, but some overlapping, whilst I was working on myself, very much was part of that. And I could identify, so I was known, you may or may not know, I was known as the person that you send in to the most hardcore kids.
No, I didn't know that.
So I did one-to-one work. So I would go into the flats in Barton Hill.
Where were you? I'm guessing
Barton Hill, St Paul's, Easton, working with the Bristol Youth Inclusion Project, which was like what was then the top 50 thing they used to do with kids at most at risk of offending and all of that. And I could get results with the most difficult young people because nothing they did or said scared me, because I'd kind of on a different level kind of been there a bit. However, looking back on it, one of the reasons I should have been affected by it more than I was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As in, I could go into situations that other people would be like this, and that was because I was still a bit traumatized myself.
Well, you probably switched off to the world
exactly,
a little bit.
Yeah. So that sort of what's the word, depersonalization or whatever it is. I think I was a bit detached and wasn't feeling stuff.
Well, if you're not feeling that empathy as well, I'd argue that it would have been difficult maybe to kind of see the kind of the real impact on those young people. I suppose.
Yeah. No, I could see the impact. It was more kind of that should shock me because that shocks other people, but it's not shocking me.
Yeah. But why? Yeah. And then that becomes...
And I don't think I realised that at the time, but sort of looking back a bit, you know, however, in the context of those young people, I was able to work with kids that other people couldn't. And I couldn't do that now.
No, I mean, I'm starting to walk into that kind of arena. Well, I know exactly what you mean.
But it was also this thing where I approached it from this perspective, which was, because people applied that judgment to me, and I started to apply healing myself, complete and utter non-judgment on those young people. I don't care what they do, what their behaviour is. That is their behaviour. But there is the person and there is the self beyond that. Yeah? So always with that perspective and that in mind, which probably at times, looking back on it, that may have, you know, there may have been a little bit putting myself at risk. But it kind of got sort of results, I would say.
I mean, it's worth probably saying now and not coming back to this, because I know the journey is going to kind of, it's going to move on a bit. What worked well back then in the youth and community work world that you were working in that you think is missing now, maybe that could be reintroduced? I think
what worked really well was that, to be blunt, was there was a local youth centre in most communities in the city, run by the local matriarch or patriarch that knew the uncle, the brother, the sister, you know. I had networks in Barton Hill. So when a young person who's 18 is kicking off and this, you know, they know that I know their older brother or their uncle, you know, all of that stuff. So there was an awful lot of authentic people working in youth work then that had strong, deep-seated relationships with generations, exactly. And this is probably controversial to say, but it's true. You know, I'm on record of saying it. I was around in the youth service when all the changes were made by the city council. I think putting youth services out to tell, you know, it wasn't perfect. I think it lacked.
But there's good and bad in everything.
It lacked innovation, perhaps you could argue, and it was a bit stagnated and it needed freshening up. But I think when youth services went out to tender to organisations and to staff that didn't even know the area in which they're working in, and youth centres were closed, was the single-handed worst decision ever made in Bristol by the local authority for probably 100 years. And I know it's not unique to Bristol. It's also happened in other cities across the UK.
I think most people that work within this field that are around to see some of that would agree. And that is, it wasn't all perfect, but it did provide a far wider kind of, you know, scope of support. That people...
And I don't think people realise. I think someone once said to me, and it's always stuck with me, and it was actually a sport-related thing to do when I went on to work for Street Games, was people don't realise, you know, in a youth centre or in a kind of rock-up football session somewhere, you look at it and you think they're not. Oh, it doesn't seem to be. It seems quite chaotic, or it seems it isn't overly structured or organised. And someone said, okay, see that person there? Remove them from this session and put somebody else in that they don't know, and then see what happens. You have no idea what that person is doing by their sheer presence.
There's the hierarchy of it, and whatever's going on that's chaotic over there, they know that at the end of that session, mum might have just left, whatever's just happened. Who are they going to? You know, that relationship gets built on a different way. It's on a different footing and a foundation than what it is in other places and spaces, which is why you get the real engagement of those young people in their authentic self, not saying what they feel like they have to.
And I don't think that was recognised. It wasn't recognised. People were bamboozled. You know, I worked for an organisation that actually, because there's no jobs, so I had to, for an organisation that did get a contract, you know, to do with this.
Can you say, because there's going to be quite a lot that we move on to, and I definitely want to cover quite a lot of that, because I know you've got lots of different experiences. I wonder whether, with that said about the voluntary sector and the youth work world, that, you know, obviously ended up.
I'm going to do this now.
What a pain in the ass.
I was told by Dougie not to. Sorry.
Get rid of him. What could change, do you think, with? Because there's challenges with what would have been the youth service. There's challenges now with what is the voluntary sector, and all these different organisations pitted against each other, really, to do the things that are needed for young people. What could change maybe with the how things are set up with the voluntary sector in the youth work world to have a bigger and better impact? Well, not necessarily bigger, but just to improve. What do I think should happen?
I mean, it's a big question. I think first, if I can roll back and just say that I do think that I remember the era when there was a lot of funding for youth work in the city, sort of mid-early Blair years, when there wasn't before. Yeah. And suddenly a lot of money came into that sector, Sure Start, you had all that sort of stuff. And then I remember particularly working at this point in Barton Hill when it was wild. Yeah. There'd be a burnt out car at the Neffam every week. Yeah. Kids were, and it was like, whoa, it was heavy, And so it was quite tough in the beginning. So people start working with that age group.
That was the time, because I worked in Barton Hill for a bit, and it was after that. That was in the time when you had a lot of kind of the British Caribbean community and the white working class. There was a lot
of racism. It was a National Front area and all that going off all the time. And then and you had, it was just quite wild, And then you had a lot of provision. And that kind of, some people were a bit far gone, but we started to work with, and then you started to get early years people working with the sort of 6, 7, 8-year-olds. When this 6, 7, 8-year-olds came through to be 18, they were completely different than the kids that were 18 when I first went there. Exactly, right? So I have seen firsthand with my eyes and ears the impact that has, not just on young people, on an entire community when young people are worked with from a young age. When you're not doing targeted one-to-one works great, but you're not doing it when a young person's an issue or a challenge or a problem. You're just working with young people because you're in a locality in an area and you do it from a young age, and the impact that I've seen that. I've now seen what's happened when you turn the tap off from that. And I think everything that's happening now in the city is complicated. I'm not saying it's simple, but lots of incidents and lots of things that are happening in the city around youth violence, I personally believe is a direct correlation to young people not being worked with at a young age. I think the academisation of education
all the
in the
evidence
city
shows improves.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's out there.
Evidence is there. I think the academisation of schools and the fact that there's this sort of exclusion pipeline, school exclusion pipeline, where young people are being temporarily excluded for the most ridiculous things that I'm seeing a lot. We're kind of criminalising young people from a young age. All this stuff needs to be really looked at hard and fast. And so that's the first thing we need to do. In terms of your question around what can we do, I think we need to look at schools. This has become a business. Yeah, it's become.
You're talking about academies.
Academies, yeah. Where young, school exclusions have gone up by 44% in the last 2 years, Ben. They've gone up by about 63% in the last 10 years. Yeah, young people are suddenly not more naughty today than they were when we were younger. No. Yeah. It was quite hard to get suspended when we were at school, whereas now it's like you haven't got your tie on. It's ridiculous. And I'll challenge any challenge any head teacher to come on my podcast show. I have them to talk about this stuff and say, if you know there is an exclusion prison pipeline, why are you excluding so many young people? That is like sort of saying, there's a fire there, let's just push young people into a fire. It's nuts, yeah? Okay?
I'd say to you, I'd seen last night, I seen Paul Todd, who I used to work with years ago at Engrove School, and he's now at Lansdowne, and he was chatting to me about that.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, it feels like, we've said about this before on this podcast, and, you're basically saying the same thing. It's like we already know, like, the different key kind of indicators to someone that's going to be on that pipeline. Yeah. You know that at 12 years old.
Yeah.
So the stuff you were talking about, like, there's interventions before that, but you're talking about even earlier about that literally just unconditional support for those young people that may or may not have that support around them at home, or they may have it. Yeah. It's an extra layer of support. What is holding back this kind of stuff not being reintroduced if it's like a groundswell of people that have worked in these kind of areas in the past, that have seen what's worked, and now we can see the impact of it not being done and how things in some cases are falling apart? Why aren't they turning back the clock with the things that have worked well? Is it just money? I find it hard to believe it can be.
I think money is part of it. I think there's also... it's very, very hard once that you've created cuts to, local authorities. We spoke about youth services, also sport development. When I was in the sport development team at the council, we had about 70 people, and now there's about 3 of them. Yeah, our job being to develop, sport clubs, support them, activities, all that stuff has also gone on top of this. That has impact, and it's quite difficult to suddenly regale that back. Because they're kind of like, we're in this phase where it's, charity sector sort of taking up that space a bit. Yeah, that's fine.
In difficult times.
Some excellent organisations that do that, 100%. Not in any way, shape or form going to say it. But there are some organisations that have benefited from austerity. Yeah. Let's be brutally honest about it.
Well, the bigger you get, the more handouts you get from the higher table.
And I think if you can make the compelling argument that what you do has impact to young people, and you've got to realise when you're dealing with a lot of politicians, even some academics, they didn't really understand this stuff, really. Let's be honest. Yeah, some of them do, but they don't. And they're quite easily bamboozled by a persuasive argument and lots of data and monitoring. So, we're working with these young people.
Life
we could do this, we can do that. And then maybe that funding goes to a particular organisation or goes sort of somewhere else. So I think there is a bit to do with funding. I think the biggest thing for me, though, in terms of what you should do to make impact again, is there is the bit on schools, like I said, there is the bit on, I think trying to get some youth centres back, but youth work is not just about buildings. The biggest thing that I think I've seen have the most
it's about
impact,
people and investing in people.
Is exactly. It's more. I'd like to see a hell of a lot more street detached teams in the city, all across the city, working together. And I think if I was a funder, or if I was a MP, or if I was, head of the DCMS or whatever it's called, I would be like looking at mapping out across the city, an organisation that works citywide with teams, recruiting the right people out and about. Then, some of the stuff like the existing youth clubs that are there, or, you can support people into that. But we both know that young people don't go to youth clubs unless there's a sort of bridge into it. And that's what we used to have.
Relationships.
We used to have play rangers in the city. I sound like I'm moaning now. Play rangers, detached youth teams. I mean, we're in Knoll West now. Yeah. This was notorious for one of the best detached youth teams in the city. What was his name? Simon.
Stokes, is it?
Yeah. And I think going where, and I ended up working for Street Games, which is all about that, is going where young people congregate and just talking to them and engaging is critical, particularly for what's happening at the moment. You can build as many youth clubs as you want and do as many knife amnesties as you like, and all this stuff.
Well, it comes from relationships. And if you build a relationship without an agenda based on the terms of the young people, it might be F off one week, it might be, you spoke about the trainers the week before.
Yeah.
Whenever that moment of in comes, and then you build that relationship, that is when the opportunity to support those young people on a better journey. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to show you another time, and I'll send it to you, and whether you've got the time to look at it or not, I'd love to question you on it afterwards, because it'd be interesting, because I think what you're talking about, this like ecosystem, this journey that we've developed over the last 7 years, grassroots communities, which basically is probably a lot of the things you're talking about. Yeah. The painful thing is how do you fund those things? Like we've seen it work for us, because it works for young people, but it's how then do you increase the impact so it becomes part of the city once again.
I think one of the challenges, and this is a really, really big challenge, okay, and I understand why, because the nature of the funding landscape kind of creates, whether people will admit it or not, a degree of competition.
The voluntary sector, it pits
people
it together.
Exactly. So people kind of work together, yes, but it's a sort of like and I get it, because you've got to pay the bills, you've got staff to pay, whereas when you have public authority youth clubs and youth centres that are funded by your council tax or your you're just doing the work,
which is where it's at.
Yeah, and this has become a challenge where it's like I distinctly remember there was antisocial behaviour in a particular area around Speedwell, and the organisation I was working for, that we're a third sector organisation, we were told to go there and do something and responding to it, and it was like, well, it's not in our contract. And I'm like, well, because when I worked for local authority, we would just go there. So it became about, that's not our contract, we need to be paid more. So
I would have just gone there anyway.
Yeah. So I think there's that thing around. One of the challenges is so I would say you try and build some more youth centres are in the right places. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be huge, massive ones. I know that's the model that's being rolled out a little bit now nationally.
What's your thought on
big
that?
hubs?
I mean, do you think that is the way forward?
I think those things are okay, providing you have detached teams, satellite sites. Like micro youth clubs around it. Otherwise, you're only going to get a certain type of young people to walk through the door. That's totally fine.
What is that type? Like
I think it tends to be probably a little bit more socially mobile. Probably got parents who are a bit more proactive at taking them there. Probably young people that perhaps aren't in so much of a need of stuff. But I am a great believer in universal provision for everybody and everything. We just need to do it from a younger age.
Just quickly on that, because this isn't about nothing on there is about digging anyone out. It's just about talking about the reality of things. Do you feel like that is understood? That kind of mentality that you just spoke about there. Do you feel like that's probably understood? Because let's be straight, we're talking probably about youth zones, aren't we, and things like that. Yeah. Do you feel like I can't understand how that is not understood by everyone within the youth work world. I struggle with really at bedtime when people are going to sleep and their honesty hats on and they're just suddenly like, this is what's needed.
Let me give you an analogy then, right? Yeah.
Is it?
I'm going to give you an
analogy. Do people mirror what you're thinking, but then make other decisions, or do they really not believe it?
There's sort of two things to that. I mean, because I've been around the early conversations around when the station came. The same debate was happening.
Same.
Yeah. Hillfields, which is something else I'll talk about, because they wanted to do the same thing for Hillfields, but it didn't work because the community didn't want it. And what they soon realised is young people from outside Hillfields don't really go into Hillfields. Yeah. So I'll park that for now. All right. Say you're really hungry and you haven't eaten for 3 days, and you don't, your favourite food is steak, and you don't really like chicken, but you haven't eaten for 3 days, and somebody puts a chicken in front of you, you're going to eat it, aren't you? Right? What we're talking about here is the only thing being offered, I think, is the only and this is a national thing. The hub,
why
hub.
Does it have to be the?
It doesn't have to be. I'm just saying that if you look through what was Conservative funding, and there's others that have taken place in the country. There's rumours of something. One I think may potentially come to Southmead. Yeah, potentially in North Bristol anyway.
Okay. I'll say something in a minute. But I did ask about Central and East way back when to a certain person that was in control of that, and they said it never worked there. I said, well, it's unlikely to work.
I think it's, if truth be known, I've been to one or two. I know what they do, and it is good, and what they do in there is good. But I also think from a political perspective, and I know this now from being a journalist and talking to politics, it's a lot about gestures and being, we're doing something here. South Bristol hasn't had any funding, any, infrastructure for X amount of time. We're bringing this to young people. So it's a good look. It's a kind of thing. When you drill into the detail of what that means, redistribution of money out of other pots and stuff like that, you then get into a debate. People like
that money from the council that was going towards the detached. You were saying it was so that was meant to be needed. That was meant to be
has gone into that.
Has gone into that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not someone that I hope it 100% is success, but I do worry that there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of communities that are going to not engage with it for a variety of reasons, and they are not going to have the support they need within their own locality, which really what
and I think that's
just one quick thing really. If people are creative enough and have enough sway in the world to be able to get that built there, then how do they not have enough sway to say, okay, we'll make that a bit smaller, and it could be a centralised South Bristol space where we end up trying to bring different people towards it. But then the money that we don't spend on that can still go on buildings because people like the shiny things. But to help doing up those other spaces in those other communities where they can actually engage those young people that won't travel for a variety of reasons, some difficult reasons, and then really make it something that is inclusive to everyone and really has everyone's buy-in.
Well, the notion, essentially, that they call it a youth zone, What we're talking about here is a youth hub. It's a hub, not a youth club, And I think youth hubs can work, but youth hubs can only work, I was a youth worker, but I worked in sport development, which is about development, mapping, strategies, how you join the dots, That's how I think. And a hub can work, and we've done this with sport, right? Providing there are, as I said, satellite sites, outreach teams, and that is a centre that could be used for tournaments, for courses, for the next step for young people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not.
But there needs to be the first.
It's not
base.
a big youth club, though. This is what people confuse it as. That they think it's, it's kind of not, because I think.
Well, it won't have the intimacy. I'll give you a little analogy, because you wanted to come and chat to people that are doing Youth Gap. We started trying to do that programme in difficult circumstances between young people from Artcliffe and North West. And basically, most of these young people, a lot of them haven't been going to school for the last 4 years in the situation you're talking about. Others, social, emotional challenges, kicked out of school, various different issues going on there.
Yeah.
One of the things that is most obvious is they'd have no experience of youth provisions, don't even know what youth work is, never been in youth clubs. They just don't know anything about that way of working. If they haven't really been in school for whatever reasons. The challenge is people don't know what this work is. And I think the need for a lot of young people is those small places and spaces where they can feel part of something. It's not overwhelming. And then they move into the hubs. And I think maybe we're saying the same thing, but that's the point. We've got to start from there, because those kids that wouldn't engage in youth gap longer term, because they just had no concept of what it was, and they couldn't handle
you're
it.
right, and also
they're not going to suddenly.
No,
it's too much.
And what you need to do. So this happened with sport a little bit. So if I go back to my after I sort of finished youth work, I moved into sport development. Yeah. Because I was kind of more interested in this. I saw the impact that sport had, boxing, football, etc., with young people. So that was what I went into. And we had 3 hubs in the city. City Academy was a sport, they then called a school sport centre or something like that. City Academy in East, Port, what's it called? Portbury, is it?
Portbury?
In the north, I can't remember quite what it's called. And in the south, Ashton.
Lawrence, do you know about Lawrence Weston?
No. I can't remember the name. It was one in the north of the city, and in the south of the city, it was Ashton Park School. Okay. All of that was built through sport development money, right?
I didn't realise that. Okay, yeah.
Part of the funding came with.
But that's schools.
Money.
So
Hang on,
that's
no. It's schools, but it was also there was a sport development budget attached to what they did, which was here is X amount of money to develop satellite sites, outreach football sessions to feed into it. There was a strategy around each of those sites. If that's what happens with one of the youth zones, that's fine. But from what my kind of sense is,
but it won't be youth
it's
work
only used. It's only primarily used to count people that come through the building, right? So they'll invite an organisation to run their boxing club or to run this, to run that. Whereas I think that's fine. But I think what should happen is there should be outreach stuff, which could be delivered by grassroots communities or whoever connected to that. I just think if you're not going to do the connecting bit on the outside, it's the Mountain to Muhammad thing and all of that. People aren't going to come. Horse ain't going to come to water, whatever the phrase is. Yeah. So, and that to me, that is obvious. A lot of people don't think like that. A lot of people in youth work, dare I say, just think about young people and the impact. But if you think wider, strategically, how that fits in with the city and stuff like that.
If you're going to put that amount of money into something like this, then there would have been a lot of strategic thought put into it. I mean, I'm sure there has been.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I know this is. I'm hopping about, but I know this as a journalist that this is politicians like big buildings and they like to have impact and like to be associated with stuff and say I built this, I did that. Rich philanthropists like to be associated with big shiny buildings. I don't just mean youth club, youth just generally, yeah. So it's like what I put into something. There's something visual here you can show, yeah. Giving grassroots communities some money to really, really impact on a young person's life that they don't even know or don't even see. These are sort of grand gestures a little bit. That's their kind of MO a bit, I think. And I've come to understand how those people operate and think. And I think that they don't have the acute understanding of communities and young people like you would.
The sad thing is here, isn't it, really? The sad thing, what this comes down to is that the biggest resource you've got in youth work is the youth worker. And to invest in people to be those skilled youth workers with all the different tips and tricks and all the rest of it, to be able to deliver that stuff that will change lives, you have to invest in those people. And it's better to be investing in those young people that have come from those communities to be those people, to be the changes they want to see. Yeah. And sadly, that pipeline doesn't really exist. Yeah. And you need to have the spaces for them to do it in. And I just feel like everyone keeps talking about youth work and how these things that are, that's going to solve the problems. We need to the best youth work I've done has been in a freaking hedge or I've been in a football changing room. Because it's about building relationships and then supporting young people on a journey that they want to go on. Yeah. And it might be you don't have all the skills for that, but you will know others and you bring other people in and you signpost other people. Yeah. I'm not saying that can't happen at a youth zone. I just feel like that amount of money, there must be a bit of creativity that people could actually increase the impact, increase the outcomes for young people.
There has to be.
Because that's what it's about.
Well, there has to be, because you think about what's happened, recent sad, incidents this side of town, but also inner city Bristol, even, stuff in the north as well. There's a problem at the moment. There's a challenge. That isn't going to be solved by youth zone. Don't care what any argument anybody gives. It's just not, wherever that is. That is going to be solved, boots on the ground, conversations, relationships, old-fashioned,
who's out there to do
community pipe. The community pipe pipers, the matrix, all those kind, and other things than that. Okay, and I'm not saying that a youth hub is not part of that ecosystem, but it's one element of a far more complex picture. And I think if people think this is going to solve everything, then that it's for the birds, yeah. But obviously, if you work for, youth zones, that they want them everywhere. There's loads now, aren't there? There's like 15, 20 in the country or something like that. I think, maybe that might be wrong. So don't quote me on that. But there is up north in the northwest in London. This is the kind of model. Right. I go back to that's fine, providing you're doing the other stuff around it, and I think it's really critical and really important.
But that other stuff needs to be valued, Neil, and that I feel like maybe...
Don't forget, it's not just about youth work now. You're talking about police and crime commissioner stuff are looking at this stuff. You've got DCMS looking at this. There are eyes on this stuff. That stories in Bristol. These things have gone national. This is on the national focus now, which is what can we do to tackle youth violence? What can we do to tackle knife crime? People know there's an issue and there's a problem, and I think
it's a systemic problem.
It's a systemic problem. Yeah,
like pointing out some fairly clear things that we need to start a lot earlier and have people that are fit for purpose and skilled to be able to do that work.
Yeah. Which I would argue, without blowing smoke at your arse a bit, what you're doing with the courses you do, training up young people from communities to become youth leaders in their areas, and is kind of what used to happen back in the day, but it doesn't anymore. Which is about investing in people that have that understanding in those communities. That's what we need more of, I think.
But we need to. The point is, I'm having to engage them a lot further down the line, because at the ages of 17 to 30, at that stage, they've been through enough shit through life to be able to realise they've got no support behind them now, and they really do need to grasp these opportunities now, because they know they've got nothing else. If you're 15, 14, 16 and you're still kind of going through life and you don't really know what's going on, and you haven't necessarily got that understanding of how youth work or youth provisions can support you, and you haven't been through the big reality check, I've got nothing, I'm signing on, shit, what's the options, then you're not necessarily ready to grasp that. But you are ready to grasp that when you've had the support of Sure Start, you've had the juniors, the inters, and you've been slowly, isn't
it's sticking a plaster on after the event, and you reduce your chances of being able to succeed.
We could have a
with
bigger
young
impact.
People.
We could increase that impact if that pipeline was
But this
there.
all goes back to that argument I said about the changes in what happened to youth services in the city, is that what was kept, there were some universal stuff, but not much. What was kept was targeted youth, one-to-one youth work with young people that are already presenting
social
a challenge and a problem. I'm using,
it's a money spinner, mentoring. We stopped doing it because I felt like, our skills were group work, right? We could have been engaging a lot more young people once we built those relationships one-to-one and made those, and it's turned into... There's not enough mentors out there, so people know to get paid well, which will support other delivery that they do. And then they're bringing different people to do the mentoring that aren't necessarily skilled and fit for purpose.
Let me be clear about what I said, though. I'm not saying that mentoring and one-to-one isn't important. What I'm saying is that became the only thing that was still kind of funded, when actually there's a place for it, and there's a twin hit, which is you reduce your likelihood of having to work with somebody in a one-to-one targeted capacity if you are doing universal provision with young people from the age of 6 or 7. It's not rocket science, it's pretty straightforward. So you redirect funding into that age group and you work your way through and you keep doing that. And I think that we've done it before and we can do it again, but there has to be intent, there has to be a plan, there has to be people that are having, there has to be some really honest conversations that some organisations in the city need to not just think about their bottom line and think about their own brand, their own sort of development, which is important, I get. They need to think about the city and they need to think about the impact that what they do has on young people. And there are, in my experience, because I've interviewed a lot of them, there's a lot of CEOs, there's a lot of people in different youth organisations, there's a lot of people in sport organisations as well. Usually the workers get on all right, actually, but there's a lot of egos at the top, that want to be leading the charge, right? And I won't name anybody, but there's a lot of them.
Go on. Don't. I don't want you to do that. But I mean, I think people might know anyway.
They need to. I mean, what I will say is, it takes a certain type of person to want to be a leader of an organisation. Sometimes, anyway. I mean,
and some people don't want to.
Yeah. Well, you've sort of got there begrudgingly a bit, haven't you? But because you created your own thing and all that. But I think what happens is it becomes there's a dynamic here where people are sort of positioning themselves and battling, and that stuff. When I worked for the local authority, and my job was the sport event officer to get all the sport organisations in the room, knock heads together and say, look, stop all this. I don't care. You don't have to be best mates, but we're working together on a collective solution to a problem. Yeah. and I don't mean rhetorically, I mean actually fucking mean it and do it. That's what needs to happen in Bristol. And if and that's the only thing, and that means working together to make the case that you're talking about to national government, to philanthropists.
It can't be a 4-year plan, can it? It's got to be to put the foundations for this stuff to actually work.
It's a 15, 20-year plan.
And we've got to go. It's got to transcend colours of politics. It's literally. Do we believe in young people community?
Yeah.
If we do, let's absolutely invest something which is the strategy that will make the difference.
Yeah.
There needs to be long term.
Yeah. And that's also not just youth work, to broaden it out. We've got kids having kids, haven't we? We've got young people with carrying their own traumas that are passing down the line that don't quite know how to do, there's this family support. It's kind of, a big thing, I would say. One thing I've noticed, and it was, quite frustrating at the time, is I would get young people ready, for employment that had a bit of a checkered past, and then organisations wouldn't take a calculated risk on them. And it's like, big organisations with money in the city that take from Bristol, they need to give opportunities to these young people, jobs, real jobs, yeah? Because that's what leads people away from a life of wherever they're leading. Because if you don't get that, you just backslide to it anyway. So this is a citywide issue and problem that people need to really get together.
And it's interesting you saying that. And again, it's not about what we're doing today. It's about hearing you. But I will just say that what you're saying is, again, based on your understanding, your knowledge, listening to people and working out what works. There's no difference to the 6-year research, whatever you want to call it, basically discussions with normal everyday people and communities about what matters is how GAP come about. And I one thing I find challenging is once you've done things, you see the impact of it, right? And it works with those right at the sharp end of things, with the trauma and the various things you're talking about. And you see them realise opportunities that is open to what they want to do based on their passions and interests, is how you then get over that kind of threshold of, okay, it works. How do you then get it so it's more widespread, so it can support more people, instead of everyone kind of being in their silos a little bit, thinking, all right, that looks all right over there. About getting this stuff widespread. Because this is the thing, it's not about a badge of honour. I'd go and work for the youth service tomorrow. Because it's all about the impact for young people. And I wonder, and I put it to you, like, do you feel like things like the Youth Alliance and partnerships, do you feel like those things are working and they're doing what you were talking about? Because that kind of feels like it's the same thing.
I'm not in the room now, so I probably don't know fully. I'm probably not qualified to answer that fully. All I know is what I kind of see from the outside now in a different capacity. And obviously I'm probably in a relatively unique position where I've probably interviewed most organisations or workers or CEOs in the third sector in Bristol, not all, but including youth work in some capacity. And then I would know that from working in some places. So I'm qualified in that sense, but I am not in the room now. So I suppose I don't know. All I do know is I see the kind of results of what happens a little bit. I think I don't know if everybody's on the same page or not. And I think that, collaboration is good. I also understand that the funding landscape makes people pit against each other. But I sort of go back to what really should happen. I know you've still got people like Tina Bond and stuff from the council. That you really need a kind of, what I would say is a kind of robust city council that can pull people together. And not just because there's a funding thing, actually with the real intent to come together. I don't know if that happens now or not. Some people listening to this might say that is already happening anyway.
No, interestingly, and capacity is a problem for small organisations like Grassroots and others. Like, if I have to prioritise going to a meeting with the bigwigs and chat about this, that and the other, and I've got things that I really need to do, then you're going to have to choose the things that are going to impact on young people straight away. So that is a challenge. But I guess, for me, the whole thing about the Youth Work Alliances, it's all over the country. It's happening in different places. It's normally connected with councils to do what you're talking about. But if money comes down from this Labour government, where's it going to go? It's not going to go directly to the voluntary sector.
So UK Youth,
it will go it'll go to councils. Councils will disperse it. I don't know what's happening now because I haven't been part of the Youth Alliance for a little while. Not for there's reasons, but not because I don't believe in it. I wish it well, and I will be involved in it if I have capacity. Is that Tina Bond, for example, and the council They may be involved in it now, but they weren't even involved in it because people voted for them not to be involved in it.
Yeah.
So you've suddenly got these things that are there, probably, that will get the money from the council to disseminate it across the city to make sure we're not doing the same things.
Yeah.
They're not even in the room. Now, it might have changed, but they weren't in the room. So I just feel...
Who weren't in the room, sorry?
The council.
Yeah.
It was voted that they weren't going to be part of the Youth Work Alliance from the people in that room. So...
Yeah.
I
think there's always that tension between local authority and third sector stuff. Yeah, there's always been that tension a little bit, which is like philosophically as well, that people believe these services should be delivered by, through your own, as a public service. Yeah,
well, it should.
And you've had charities picking up. Some have grown, big. In the sports scene. You think about the Robbins Foundation or Bristol Rovers Community Trust, that were minuscule. They were run by, the ex-pro that he's on the golf course at 2:00 and he just goes down the old people's home or goes to a primary school and that's it, job done. Whereas now, they're multi-million-pound organisations that have filled that space, doing great work, but also they are still growing their brand. Yeah,
I would find it hard to know how great all the work is when we don't have a youth. We have a staffing crisis.
Yeah.
Because of the limitations in the amount of people that are doing the courses and the people that they can learn from that have got that X amount of years of lived experience of delivering this work. And that isn't anyone's fault. That's the decimation of the youth service. That's not anyone else's fault.
Yeah.
But the standard and the quality of what gets delivered is going to be based on what people have learned and what they've experienced. And if that isn't...
Yeah, because that's your thing, is a lot about the quality of the delivery of youth work itself.
You can have 800,000 million flipping youth clubs all across everywhere, but it's only as good as the people that's running it.
It's not the quality that's... that's a good point, I mean, I guess what my point was more... if it's only... sort of third sector organisations are going to grow their own brand... and are going to grow what they do and be mainly concerned around how they fund what they do, as opposed to just looking at what the problem and the solution is. I think you said on the film I made about Hartcliffe, about people sticking their finger in the air, that what the next funding thing is all, and then it was it's a bit like Serco, isn't it? They do prisons, they do this, they do that,
and that's not their fault. They kind of have to do it because of the situation they're put in. But I just but actually basing it on.
So I guess my wider macro point on this is the nature of the landscape creates where we are, and if that's just needs to be recollaborated. You said about the new Labour government is, I think local authorities in youth services, be youth work, sport, delivery, whatever, need to start to play a stronger role again. Okay. And they need to basically coordinate stuff. Because let's face it, when you're I would argue where sport development was probably better than youth services with stuff like this. Okay, yeah. So you're a small organisation that's growing with what you do. Do you get any sort of development support, or have you any from local authority? No. So if you were a football club or a boxing club, I could, several I'd supported to set up, sorry. My job as a development officer is to support you with your committee, your governance, support you getting funding, getting facility, coaching, getting your coaches qualified, doing this, doing that, doing that. I go back to that thing. Youth workers think about young people. They don't think about development enough. And you've got people making decisions on development in Bristol that know nothing about it. They know about young people. And I've worked with these people directly at City Council, and they're very, very good youth workers, right? Do they know about developing hub sites, satellite sites, street teams across the city? I would challenge that. Because I've done that stuff in sport, and I would challenge that because I don't see it.
This strongly links in with what you said off camera, which, I mean, I don't know what the time is, Dougie, but I knew we were going to go on today.
Yeah, so.
But, it's...
Joe Rogan did a 4-hour one, I think, the other day, so don't worry about it.
Get the batteries out.
yeah.
That links in, doesn't it? If you've got people that have basically started life as a youth worker, they probably had lived experience when being a youth provisions and all the rest of it, and they wanted to get into it. They got into it, they started making a difference. It's very rare for those people to move up the tree to run an organisation.
Yeah.
I'm one of them, and I will say that this is not very big, but purposely not massive, because I just got like the whole growth thing scares the living daylights out of me, because it's like a different world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think then that people really that are youth workers aren't equipped or just don't learn because they haven't had that same support,
Yeah.
or they're not the same.
Well, it's two different things, isn't it? It's like saying, I don't know, I can't think of an analogy, but like working.
I don't want any more fish and chip analogies.
Working with young people. I'd say the
time.
same thing. Working directly with young people and knowing how to really, really connect with a young person and develop something is not necessarily the same at knowing how to develop more youth clubs or develop more. It's not the same thing. It's a different thing. Yeah.
No.
Some people can do both. Some people have come through and to do both. Some people are stronger at one or the other. But in the whole, you know, what I would say is this was where some of the third sector organisations have been very good and fleet-footed because they've got a little bit more shrewd business head people than what you had in the local authority youth work, which was like, you know, people that are youth workers or senior youth workers. They're not strategists in that same sense. But then you go to some, you know, I mentioned them before. You know, you go to, City Robbins Foundation, where you've got people that have been driving that get this stuff. You don't turn an organisation from being like, you know, earning 50 grand a year to 1.5 million a year. You know, when Adam came in at Bristol Rovers and what he's doing, you know, Martin Bisp at Empire Fighting Chance. These are people that are outside the sector, right? That are sort of business people that kind of know how to operate.
Say something then, because it fits in.
And they've grown that. They've grown that because, you know, and they're not people. You know, I hope they don't mind me saying so. That really know an awful lot about youth work or young people. But what they do know is how to grow an organisation.
But as we said before, I think off camera, that's fine. You know, people that know what they know. You want people involved that are really good at what their specialist thing is to help the wider kind of situation. Now, if the voluntary sector is the only thing that's driving this work now, then there's probably a little bit of this whole collaboration cake, which doesn't get talked about enough. If we want to improve and increase the impact, then people that have got a larger part of the cake that have those skills, is there something in, maybe they are the developers, like what you were talking about with the sports development team, when you go and specifically support those smaller organisations to go and increase the impact and have a solid kind of foundation and footing to be able to
for me, that
improve
should be
the work. That should be part of the offering, because let's be honest, a lot of those. But it's difficult because it's voluntary sector. So someone's got to pay.
There are people, you know, they're going to be unpopular for saying this. You know, one of my first, you know, people, you know, I worked with Tina in Barton Hill many moons ago. Back in the day, she's brilliant with young people, right? The role of the local authority, if you've got the primarily delivery being, you know, taking place with third sector organisations across the whole city, be that in youth or in sport, the role of the local authority should be exactly that. What else are they doing? It should be maybe maintaining some standards of youth work delivery, granted, but it should be about going to, I don't know, another Ben Carpenter who's 3 years behind you, supporting you, how you set up your organisation, the governance, what you do. That should be what else are they? I'm sorry, but it should be about making you robust, supporting you, helping you apply for funding, all that stuff. I remember talking to Asher. You had Asher Craig on your show recently, didn't you? I remember having this conversation with Asher, and she once asked me what's missing. I said, what's missing is somebody doing the development bit, helping and supporting organisations.
And I think you're right to some extent, but in fairness to Tina, and I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what she does day to day, but I do know that a lot of the stuff in the past when I was working with it, she's pushed towards the targeted things.
Yeah,
and so
it's not her fault.
It's not her fault. But you're right. That is like the building blocks.
Yeah.
There's many things
I love
that are
Tina,
missing.
and she's amazing. I got a soft spot. So it's not. But she's probably following a sort of chain of command of how you've got to do and how you've got to do. You know.
And are those bigger, you know, you could say successful?
But they still are youth workers, Ben. But they're not strategists or development people.
No. But what I'm saying is those voluntary sector organisations that have grown and they've got that business sense and that strategy and they can do those things.
Yeah.
Is there something about this is our gift, and then they do that? Because the reality is that will increase the impact and support communities to thrive more. But it does take people saying, okay, I'm going to give away a bit of my cake.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
And that's just a difficult.
That's a good point. And I've
because I support young people that have gone through different processes where they've delivered things that make a difference in communities, social action, social enterprise.
Okay, let's remove. Okay,
they are ready to potentially, with the right support, step into maybe starting something themselves. Ideally, they wouldn't have to, but they are. Yeah. And that level of support.
Or a different organisation in the city. Yeah, you're right. So let's remove it from the local authority. Let's say, you know, because of whatever, in an ideal world, you'd have more people doing that stuff. Actually, maybe, and this goes back to the whole thing about not only being concerned about your brand or growing your own thing, maybe when you're a success in what you do, you have some degree of duty, I don't know.
Giving back
To go and show another organisation, like what you were 10 years ago, the Royal You, not you personally, how you can start...
Well, I do talk a bit, actually. I am
how
doing
you
that
can
with some
start
people
to develop, yeah?
Yeah.
I mentioned Empire because they are doing that with other boxing clubs around the country now. They're going in and saying, because boxing clubs are traditionally run by, the local, geezer from the community that maybe don't know about filling in the forms, the grant applications, or what do you do? How do you
They
go
made it a business.
They have. How do you go into schools, and sell what you do in schools? But what they're now doing is go into other boxing clubs in other areas and going, did you know if you do that, you could be bringing in money, you could be doing this, you could be doing that. I would like to see more organisations doing that in the city, as in, you've been successful trying to help another. But I'm old school, Ben. I'm a different beast. I'm old school. I'm a local authority person who's community orientated and all stuff like that. And I think the landscape now is a bit different. It's a bit more sharky. It's a bit more like I'm moving on sharp elbows and all that stuff. I can play that game a little bit if I need to. But
it's painful though, doesn't it?
But in my essence, it's like, and I think there's a number of people in the Bristol, that know who's who, that see, the kind of like people that are on the, doing things for the right reasons and stuff like that. And I think that, who's in it, who's in it for the needs of young people and the needs of communities, or that those that are kind of making a living off the back of it. Yeah. And I'm all for people getting paid well, and I'm all for organisations growing, and you've got to play the game. But I do think that it has to come back to, are you doing this for young people? Are you doing this for your community? And being really, really fucking honest about that. And I think some people, if they looked in the mirror in Bristol, would be lying to themselves if they said that's what they do. Okay? Wow. It's good. Cut that one up for social media. See, this is why some of them are scared of me, because because I'm not trying to be pump my own trumpet here, but some people are a little bit nervous, and some people won't be interviewed by me anymore because they know they can't pull the wool over my eyes with some of this stuff, and I will go there and ask direct questions. So those that avoid it, to me, then that's like, they got something to hide, because you ain't got nothing to hide. You have an open conversation, won't you? Yeah.
Look, I'm glad that you give honest insight, and there'll be loads of other people with different views, and let's be honest, it'd be great to hear their views as well, because it's not one thing that works, but to open this up, start learning about people's experiences and the things that they know have worked well, to help inform what could work well in the future. And that's all we're doing. It's not digging out anyone. It's just those conversations.
Let's be comfortable. People need to get a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable. Exactly.
And that's my
argument. No one is beyond challenge. I don't care who you are, how high up you are. Yeah. I don't care who you are. We'll do it.
Challenge me.
Yeah.
I'd love to now, I know that the time is ticking on, but I don't want to miss out on the point, because I know you've been through your youth work journey, you've been through sports development, you've done a lot of face-to-face work, and then you jumped into journalism. And I feel like what's really interesting is, could you give me your thoughts and views on how you think journalism could support young people and communities to be the changes they want to see, to improve, the kind of situations that people are in? Does journalism play a role in that?
Can do.
How?
Well, I think it can be. The reason I went into journalism was because I would turn up at, or I would be involved in organising sort of big sport events and stuff like that, and we'd get like, I don't know, the local Bristol City, there's a badge down there of goalkeeper or something.
Get out of Reds! Let's not go into that.
Oh, the gas! Or whatever, would come and present some trophies, and it would be young people that were involved in, whatever they were involved in. And a journalist would come along from a local newspaper or the radio, and they would spend 95% of their time talking to the goalkeeper and little interest in the young people, And or there was that bit, and the second bit was most of them just didn't know how to talk to kids, from different backgrounds. They were just stiff and really, and I could see there was a big class issue in journalism. The way that they presented themselves, the way that they spoke, the way that they came across, and I was like, I could do that better than them. Yeah, as you said, if we go back to when I was uni, I did
it's the toolkit that you built stuff over time.
So I was like, do you know what? I can talk to young people, and actually, this is just with a microphone, or with a camera, or with a pen. Talk, or however you want to define it. And I started to go on people's on a radio show talking about community sport, talking about youth work, talking about stuff like that. And then that just grew from that. I was like a guest contributor. And then I then got my own show, and then I started writing. It just snowballed from there. And the whole premise of me doing it was off the back of what with youth and community work, which was the right people are not being given a platform. They don't know how to communicate effectively. I can be in a privileged position here to raise those voices of certain communities, certain young people, adults in communities, community heroes. That's why I did it in the first instant.
Well,
and then
it's basically how this started as well. It's interesting.
And then it sort of evolved a little bit into, I've got a bit of a platform now. I'm kind of getting a bit known. Suddenly these people that probably wouldn't, be that interested in having a conversation with me, suddenly they want to be interviewed. Suddenly they want to do this, and it starts to snowball. Then you're in a position where you could go, do you know what? That's always pissed me off, the fact that that's happening over there and nobody calls it out. I can do a documentary on that. Yeah. So kind of like starting to maybe expose some of the stuff that doesn't get challenged in the city, and then that obviously went a bit further than Bristol.
Have you seen that happen, and then you've seen change? Can you because it's difficult, isn't it? It could expose.
I've seen it all the time. I mean, it's literally something the other day when this is what happens as a journalist. Literally something the other day because it's about power, right? It's about power, and what journalism can do is give power to people that have no power. Literally the other day, there's an article. So what will happen to me is I'll get people that contact me saying this is happening, that's happening. Sometimes I'll do it, or sometimes I'll pass it across to somebody else. You've got friends, an ecosystem of journalists in the city, and I'll pass it to somebody. And I did this instant was they're getting thrown off their cricket pitch by a local school, and it's just happened like that. No say, so they're going to have to cancel this and that, the other. And they've tried. Most people have always tried to go down the right route, have a conversation, meet the complaint. No, then it's like, what can I do about this? Get a journalist to do something, interview them. That puts the wind up.
Make a bit of noise.
Before you know it, sometimes you don't even need to write the article. All of a sudden they've backtracked. This happens all the time. Because what then happens is, like, you've given a voice, you've given power to somebody, and that's the stuff I'm interested in. I'm not interested in hobnobbing. I'm not interested in the sort of high convoluted stuff. I've interviewed people like that, but I'm interested in what shift and what change that can take place. And it happens all the time, up and down the country. So some journalists are problematic. You've got client journalists that are sort of in the pocket of people and get used to sort of PR and all of that. That does happen. And some journalists are gotcha journalists that are out to sort of, kind of put a spanner in the works, and I've been around those people in newsrooms and have been a bit uncomfortable, but there's also a lot of people that are about telling truth to power and about elevating voices. That happens all the time. Just sometimes by having a conversation like we're having now, that I've had on my podcast show or I've interviewed, suddenly they're a bit nervous about taking them on again because they've got somebody that's got their back. And that's kind of what motivates me, really.
Well, it sounds like something worth getting out of bed for, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the role it can play. The role it can play is if there's a community that are annoyed by X or Y, or a young person feels this, that, and the other, or a school feels, I don't know, a parent from a school. Do you know what I mean? It can.
I think it's always that thing. It's like giving a voice. It's such a.
It's a cliche.
But it is a cliche. But if someone doesn't have a platform, and that's another cliche. Yeah. Then they're not going to.
And they haven't got a PR team behind them.
Change isn't going to happen.
So if there's a school, for example, where I don't know, a parent or a young person is not happy about something that's happened in the school, that school has an all singing and dancing PR team that can promote how great they are and stuff like that. I mean, the best one I think that I'm most proud of, proud, is that the right word? Pleased about, is, and for years I wanted to do it, was the documentary I did about the merchant venturers.
Right.
When I managed to get, have you not listened to it on Radio 4? Yeah. It's called Cancelling Colston.
Okay.
And there's a little bit around Colston in it, and then there's a bit around me getting in, that I got in there, and we were talking to what was then the master, and walking around.
Master? What's the master?
It was a woman, actually. Yeah, ironically. Yeah. Okay. They have a master of the merchant venturers kind of thing. And this is an organisation that has been around for 500 years, directly connected to the transatlantic slave trade, gives money to, community organisations in the city, does some good stuff, So it wasn't like it was a balance, it's the BBC, so there's that old debate around, what should that be used for? How does that look? So it was approached in the right way, but I always felt like I wanted to get underneath the skin of it a bit. And we were we were there in Merchants Hall, and my producer went, "Is that a bell in the corner?" I said, "What's that?" I said, "I think that's a slave bell." And I went, "You should ask." And I'm like, "No." So I went, "Is is that a slave bell under that chair over there?
Was that your opening line?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
the cameras.
Oh, yes, it was. Yes, it was. Yeah, and it was like, we're looking to see what we can do, how we present this. And then there was a whole that thing around Coulson's toenails. Do you know about that? So supposedly they should bring out Coulson's toenails at banquets and sort of nod in front of them and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And they are there, Coulson, but they're in the basement that they're looking about where they present them. So all these rumours that people had for years, it was almost like the sort of Boo Radley from, from Kill a Mockingbird kind of thing, where it was like kind of true. I managed to get right in, got access, spoke about what they do, challenged them, and they took it well.
I guess the argument is that's the point. Them being open about those things and using it as an education piece is you could argue that, okay, actually that's us learning about what's gone before, again, to help what goes forward, but I don't know how much
I mean, it's really interesting. As a journalist, it's really interesting because what happens, they've usually got like a PR person with them, who sort of manages the message a little bit. I do comm stuff for youth charities and support them and have done that off and on for years as well. So, I get that. What they'll do is they'll carefully manage the message. I'm quite good, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm quite good at making people think I'm a bit stupid. Yeah.
You are pretty good at that. I'm only joking.
Yeah. And sort of like sucking them in.
Louis Theroux style.
So they lower their guard a little bit, right? And then they suddenly start telling me things that they probably shouldn't tell me. So what happened in this instance, right, was the PR person was with the master the whole time. And I'm walking around going, bloody hell, look at that chandelier out there. Is that diamonds up there, is it? Like that. It's just like, this is grand, isn't it? All this is like... And I could see she's clocking me going, this bloke's an absolute idiot, isn't he? Like this, And she hung about for a bit because I think you're fine. I'll leave you two together if you want to carry on talking like that. And then it was bang. Yeah. And then it started asking sort of probing questions. And in fairness, I know it got back to me through somebody else. They took it on the chin and was like, sort of fine. But just probed them on, the fact that, they hold the money that they have is directly connected, wills, Colston, all this sort of stuff. They hold the will. Do you know about this? So he had no children, Colston. So they hold his will financially, which is worth like multi-millions today, and that money goes directly into organisation. All of that,
Never.
No. I mean, you would struggle today, I think, in the third sector space, not to see somebody who hasn't received some funding indirectly or directly from the merchant ventures, whether that's through Quartet or through whatever. Because that's their sort of that's their kind of which. So it isn't really about that. It's just about be honest about who you are and what you are. And I think that no one else managed to get right in there like I did. And it was a story that Tristan had done some really good. Tristan Court for Bristol, he's done some great stuff on them in terms of articles and stuff like that, but didn't quite get the access like I did. And I think the reason we got the access is because it was BBC Radio 4. They know BBC is going to be balanced, and it's like, this is national radio. You can't hide from national radio. They've not done an interview, Ben, in this city until about the mid '80s. Yeah, their membership list was a secret. Nobody knew what it was. So up until the last sort of 5-6 years, okay, I worked at the council, and I know when certain things didn't get rubber stamped by the merchant ventures, it wouldn't happen, or vice versa.
So I think that still happens?
I think they got less influence now, and I think what obviously did happen is post Colston statue coming down, they were exposed in the national media because they were involved in owning the statue, so it became like a thing that they couldn't hide from it. So they've come out, and their membership is a lot more diverse now. That they've got black people like Marty Burgess, who's now a merchant. They've got Asian people, got more women.
I mean, that's only a positive thing, as long as it's not tokenistic.
Yeah. So they've tried to become. So I think it's about. I guess my point is, journalism is about elevating those voices that don't get heard, but it's also about challenging people in power as well. That doesn't happen enough, I would say. Yeah, and that story of what happens in Bristol's a place with 20 years life expectancy. 12 years life expectancy gap between the haves and have-nots and all of that. Yeah, and there's certain institutions, organisations, and individuals that have not been challenged in Bristol and are a little bit cosy with some elements of the media and stuff like that. But I guess because I came from outside of that, I've quite enjoyed ruffling a few feathers a little bit, which has made me popular in some circles. Some people love it, or very unpopular in other circles. But that's fine. I'm happy to take that on the chin.
Well, keep fighting the good fight. That's it sounds like through the different iterations of your career, that's been something that's been pretty kind of paramount to what you want to do, and it's interesting hearing from you about how that really changed. and continued in a different kind of way in journalism and more power and keep doing the right thing.
Tired now though.
Well,
I could be
none of us are getting any younger.
I could be asked to fight anymore. It's sort of lie
Yeah,
down
but you're
now,
50.
don't you?
You said you feel like you're 20.
I know. In some ways, I feel, this time of year now, I feel like hibernating for a bit now, don't you? I'm just
but maybe that's just what we should be doing. I feel like I should be doing it.
Resting a bit, just kind of get in front of the settee at home, and maybe, and that's kind of what I mean a little bit now. I'm working on a documentary at the moment where I've got a young person who's presenting it for me. I've started to do a little bit more pushing other. Excuse me. Bring him through.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about. And I absolutely live and die on that one.
Christ, where that's come from.
On that note,
Bob Fleming.
On that note, we normally finish on a question. You're probably going to go, "Wow, this is huge! What the frickin' hell is this?" Okay. The podcast is called "What Really Matters," and if I put you on the spot and said to you, in whatever context you want to take it, if you could say one thing that really matters to you now, what would that be?
What really matters to me now, really, is very different than what I would have answered a long time ago. What really matters to me now is my kids. I've got 3 kids now.
Yeah.
13, 9 and 7, or 8 and 7. I can't
Don't
remember the middle one.
Don't get it wrong.
Which obviously I sort of supported other people's kids, didn't I, for a long time, and now suddenly got my own. I was quite late when I had my eldest. I was 35, 36 when I had him. So definitely then changes your focus a bit, a lot more. I've learned so much about myself through the mirror that they present to me, which can be good and bad. So that's like a blessing, and the only regret I have, and I'm not somebody who stands on regrets, is I should have had them early, because I didn't really want kids. I was like scared to death of it would be the end of my life. I couldn't do this, couldn't do that, and actually,
some argues it might have been.
It could have been,
it's
but
not. It's new,
isn't it? It's not less. It's more in a different way, I think. So that's definitely that. What really matters as well, I think, is definitely for me, and this probably supersedes anything, is my well-being. So that's my mental and physical health, which at times, as you know, I haven't sort of always put first and foremost. I acutely honour that now, which is like, if I, in a privileged position, I'm supposed to be able to do this because I, primarily work for myself. If I feel like I need to take time out, I'll take time out. And I think people, this whole thing around, are you working hard? And I'm like, God, no. Why would I want to do that? You work smart. You kind of, I'm fully committed to what I do.
Yeah, I'm like digging a hole, constant digging. You just work hard.
Look after yourself, man. That's I said that's the biggest thing. And I think always kind of, what I've kind of realised, without sounding too hippie about it, is the sort of growth of who you are doesn't sort of stop. But at 50 now, I kind of feel, ironically, more sort of connected to who I am, and I'm in a kind of happier place with my sense of self, probably, than I have since I was like 8, 7. Do you know what I mean?
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And you could argue that it's a shame that it's taken so long to get to, but you could say that actually that journey is what has allowed you to get to that, and it's giving you that kaleidoscope of experiences that makes you the person you are.
Well, what it kind of does is, I know, right, and I know this from being, at the edge, or even over the edge. It's like, there was a time in my life, Ben, when you could have given me anything I wanted externally, like financially, or this, that, the other, and none of it would have mattered and made no difference to my sense of peace of mind. So I know that, and I kind of know that you can be the opposite to that, which is literally like when you've lived in hell. What a lot of people don't know is right in front of their faces, just being present with your kids. Do you know what I mean? Just being present, waking up in the morning and, smelling the grass.
Thinking about something else. I mean, we all struggle with this stuff, but that is the challenge of modern life. Yeah,
been living in the moment a bit. I think that's probably what matters to me more now is, being 50. I've probably got 25, 30 years left, maybe, even at a push, perhaps. And
not for me to say.
And ending on a bombshell, which so I was diagnosed with cancer in February of this year. And I've been having treatment and stuff for that, and that was a big wake up call. And it's quite advanced, whereby had they not picked it up when they did, it would have accelerated quite quickly, and I could well have been dead within 18 months to 2 years. Yeah. So I was already on that journey of living in the moment anyway, but that's amplified that, which is like to appreciate what's in the kind of here and now. And I oddly was being propelled to go and get tested. Don't know what it was. You know, my old man passed away 10 years ago.
What is it like a certain like MOT? Where do you go?
I had. Well, it was funny enough. It was an MOT I had, and then it was another test connected to that. It was picked up in. I didn't really go with any particular symptoms. Prostate cancer. So I kind of went along, and it was like I almost on a flip of a coin didn't even have the test because it's not part of the test I had. They did, and I just said I'm weeing a lot. Is there a? And she said, well, do you want a PSA test? And I was like, oh, what's that? Yeah, go on then. So this was completely shocked. So last sort of Christmas, I was having all the tests and it was confirmed in February. So it's like odd, like this time of year, kind of now, and I have to have a test every 2 months. I had one yesterday as we record this with the same nurse. It's the first time I've seen her since. That was the one that suggested I have the test.
Good, yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you give her a high five or a hug.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever was appropriate at the time.
So I think that's just elevated that thing, which is like to appreciate the small moments, to be as present as possible, not spending too much time worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow. It's not easy, but I kind of have that sense of that. And I think when you approach life in that way, you can't really lose, can you? I don't think.
No, perfect.
So, mate.